Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. It's the unofficial start of another season of Boilermaker football. Big Ten Media Days are in the books. Fall camp begins this week on the corner of Northwestern Avenue and Cherry Lane. We're going to look at some of the top storylines from Big Ten Media Days today before we get into previewing fall camp by looking at some of the biggest questions facing the Boilermakers as practices begin. Plus, I'll answer your Purdue football questions and discuss the latest news from this past week on the future of scholarship counts in college athletics. The Countdown to Kickoff series officially begins here today. Let's get into it. If you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter at Boilers Beyond. Lots of stuff coming your way. We'll be keeping you up to date with all of the camp news, anything that comes out of camp. Lots of good stuff coming your way here on the Countdown to Kickoff series. Be sure to send in any questions on Twitter, or you can email me, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. And be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss a thing. Over the next few weeks, we will have you completely ready for when the Boilermakers and Sycamores take the field in Ross-Ade Stadium. Week 1, you won't want to miss a thing as we get ready for the season. But getting into Big Ten Media Days here, it's not like there's a ton of news that comes out of these things anymore. We talked about that a bit last week. But one noteworthy thing is the Cleveland.com media poll came out last Monday. I always forget that the Big Ten doesn't do an actual conference-sponsored preseason poll like everyone else does. So Cleveland.com does it. One writer from every school participates in it. Purdue is picked to finish 18th. That would be dead last place in the conference. And that certainly, raised some eyebrows among Purdue fans and got some Purdue fans fired up. Admittedly, I'm not very surprised by this. Right or wrong, Purdue is not a brand that is going to get the benefit of the doubt by default when you go into a season. Purdue has not maintained that consistent level of success to where Purdue's going to get a bump just for being Purdue. When you factor in that Purdue has an inexperienced head coach, that Purdue is coming off of a 4-8 season, and that two of the more well-known players on the roster, in Nick Scorton and Deion Burks, transferred out, look, it doesn't completely shock me, and to be frank, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. It gives you some bulletin board material if you're into such things. And Ryan Walters admitted as such at Big Ten Media Day. He said, we're aware of it. He didn't back away from it. Now, you can't obsess over that. Your entire shtick can't be that we're picked to finish 18th. Let's prove them wrong. You got to have more you got to have more substance than that. But it's absolutely something that Purdue can use to fire up the team and, use to motivate the guys to get ready to go this year. It's probably not the worst thing that there's not a ton of attention on Purdue. Again, Purdue's not one of those brands that by default is going to carry a lot of attention, a la a Nebraska, a Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State type. Those programs do that. Purdue does not. But nonetheless, with this schedule, it's a daunting one. I am sure that played a part in how some voters voted. I would think a fair amount of the voters took a look at the schedules as they were casting their votes. Look, it's not the end of the world. It's not a big deal. These things are not 100% accurate. They rarely are. But, look, it adds up. Purdue's preseason win total is 4.5 out in Vegas with the juice on the underside. Purdue is not getting a ton of preseason love. And we'll see if Purdue can come out this year and prove some folks wrong. But that's where Purdue's at. Some takeaways from what came from Big Ten Media Day. And again, there's not a ton. Ryan Walters gave plenty of good answers, just ready to go, excited, team's improved, all of that. One thing that really stood out is that Joey Tenona, offensive line transfer from Notre Dame, up to 310 pounds, Walters said in an interview with Steve Wiltfong from On3. Tenona's an interesting one. He's a very interesting one. He is a Notre Dame transfer who was in a car accident. He was a very, 4-star recruit out of Zionsville, gets in a car accident, medically retires from football. It did not seem like he was going to come back and play again. However, he decided to come back. He transfers to Purdue, and it sounds like he's put on weight really well. That's big news because he was not a guy that I expected to be an instant impact type of guy for Purdue this year. I figured it would be a year or two before he was really ready to do much. But by all accounts, 310, that's ready to go. That's ready to play. If he's there, if he's all the way there, that adds another body that has high upside to an offensive line that we'll talk about more as we preview the offense, but projects to be pretty decent. Projects to be one of the better offensive lines in recent Purdue memory. If you can add him, and you are getting to the point where you almost have a full 2 deep of guys you're confident in putting out there, that's great news for an offensive line that was a complete liability last year in pass protection. One thing I will always give Ryan Walters credit for is how open and willing to talk about NIL he is. It's a complex topic, and I can understand why some coaches don't talk about it in great detail, but Ryan Walters is a good salesman when it comes to NIL. Last year, we will remember when early November, he went on his radio show and bluntly said that Purdue is last in the Big Ten when it comes to NIL. And if fans want next year to be something different, we need people to donate. And by all accounts, it worked. Purdue has gotten more donations, and as he commented at Big Ten Media Days, it sounds like Purdue is continuing to make progress in the NIL game as it pertains to football. I would expect him to be complimentary of the growth if it has indeed taken place. Based on the portal results, some of the guys Purdue was able to bring in, my guess is that it has, that Purdue has improved its standing in the NIL world. Now, is Purdue Texas A&M? Is Purdue Ohio State? No. Purdue is not going to be like those schools when it comes to NIL, but Purdue has improved in that ballpark by everything Ryan Walters is saying. Keep in mind, Purdue cannot improve without that area being dialed in. Purdue basketball has been really blessed to have found countless diamonds in the rough who have made Purdue one of the most consistently competitive programs in the country at a really high level. And Purdue's lucky to have an elite men's basketball coach who evaluates talent as well as anyone. Don't assume that method can translate to football, where it's so much more of a numbers and volume game than an individual talent ID game. Purdue has to continue improving the level of talent on its roster. Without NIL, without a strong collective to go out and attack the portal every year to fill your gaps, I don't know that it's possible to get better and improve on a year-to-year basis. Tony Petitti had his segment to open up Big Ten Media Days, and I was interested to see what he would say, because we're in the world now where it's SEC and Big Ten in every sense of it. Greg Sankey spoke, and Greg Sankey kind of is the more forward-facing, aggressive speaker compared to Petitti. Greg Sankey says the SEC's fine. And for now, Tony Petitti says the Big Ten is fine. I don't know whether I believe him or not. I really don't know if I believe him or not, but I think future expansion is 100% on the table. He hasn't admitted that yet, but I think if the ACC is the ticking time bomb that it appears to be, and it blows up, the Big Ten's got a decision to make, and we'll see what decision is made there. But, overall, nothing crazy. Ryan Walters certainly very focused on this being year 2, expecting improvement from going from year 1 to year 2. That's very reasonable. Using the last place finish, or last place projection, there's not a ton here that was groundbreaking. I didn't expect it to be, but there you go. That's what I've got from Big Ten Media Day. Moving forward here, after the break, we're going to preview fall camp and what some of the bigger questions are about Purdue as fall camp kicks off here this week. This episode is brought to you by me. Yes, me. When I'm not watching sports, or more accurately, talking about them, I'm talking insurance with the people of Indiana. As an agent with Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance, I want to help you protect what you've worked hard to achieve. From home and auto to life and business insurance, I'm here to help you. Give me a call at 317-846-5861 or email me at jordan.jones@infarmbureau.com, and let's protect you from life's everyday risks. But anyways, fall camp gets going this week. It is the 1 month point, essentially, until Purdue kicks off against Indiana State. August 31st is the season opener. Wednesday will mark July 31st. So we are basically a month away from the season beginning. The most obvious question I have, and it's very general, but how much more comfortable is Purdue schematically on both sides of the ball, especially given how much turnover there is on the roster from that last year to this? Especially on defense, it was a big difference from what Purdue was running under Brad Lambert and Ron English in the last couple years of the Braum era to what Ryan Walters wants to run himself. It looks a lot different. And there were some real growing pains, especially on defense, last season. That was to be expected. Last season was not a loaded roster in terms of talent either. Purdue made do with what it had, but Purdue's got to improve and take some steps forward this year. How much more comfortable are they? On the offensive side of the ball, Purdue was able to run the ball better than I imagined last year, but the pass game did not necessarily click. Some of that was Hudson Card being banged up. Some of it was an offensive line that was mediocre at best. Some of it was a wide receiver room that lacked dynamic athletes besides Deion Burks. This year, I'm fascinated to see how much better the offense looks. And all of this comes with the caveat that roughly half the scholarship players on the roster are in their first year in this system because they're new to the program. 37 new players when you combine the portal and high school recruiting. That's a massive influx of new faces. That's getting to be a little bit more the norm in college football, but it's still a big influx of new faces. I'm very curious to see if there's, a decrease in coverage busts, if there is just a much more continuous feel to everything that goes on, a much more continuous feel to what Purdue wants to do. I don't know the answer, but it's going to be interesting to see just how much better Purdue seems to operate on both sides of the ball. The backup quarterback race is one that I'm going to be following throughout fall camp. We know Hudson Card is the unquestioned starter, and Purdue needs him to be the starter for all 12 games. That has not happened for Purdue since 2016, but Purdue needs Hudson Card to be healthy, to be playing at a high level if it wants to improve on last year's 4-8 record. Who is his backup? Marcos Davila showed some really nice flashes in the spring game, but is he ready for an actual game? Is he ready for live bullets against a Big Ten opponent? That's a big ask for a true freshman. Ryan Brown did some okay things in that Northwestern game last fall. He had clearly emerged over Bennett Meredith as the second best quarterback on last year's roster. But is he the guy this year to be the backup? Does Davila beat him out? I'd be surprised if Bennett Meredith factors into that, but you never know. Everyone's going to get their shot. Purdue's not that good to where it can just rule people out. That backup spot's interesting too, because does it alter things? You know, if the staff thinks Davila is the future and Card were to go down with something serious early, I think, yeah, you play Davila and build for the future. But if it's just a half a game thing or a 1 game thing, does that change the calculus? I don't know, but all of that's going to be interesting to watch. I'm interested to see Purdue's true freshman here. This is a talented true freshman class, finished 30th in the 2024 class per On3. That's about as good of a recruiting ranking for a team as Purdue has had in recent memory. That's a good class. At running back, Jaheim Merriweather kind of defaults as the number 3 guy. Only 3 scholarship running backs. How ready is he to play? At defensive back, that's where Purdue stockpiled the most talent in this class with some guys, Luke Williams, Coy Beasley, Terrion Grant, Ty Hudkins, Earl Culp. I know I'm missing a few guys. It's a really good group. How many of those guys in the defensive backfield burn their red shirt this year? I'd be surprised if no one burned their red shirt. Who's it going to be? That's something to keep an eye on is you get those camp reports, which true freshmen in the back end are getting the rave reviews. The special teams for Purdue were terrible last year. Purdue was under 50% kicking field goals as a team. The punting game was erratic at best. Not a whole lot going well for Purdue on special teams last year. Spencer Porath comes in. Is he ready to be the day 1 place kicker? And then does he handle kickoffs as well? Purdue had 5 kickoffs sail out of bounds last year. You can't have that. Jack Ansell replaced with another Aussie and Keelan Crimmins, Mississippi State transfer. Purdue needs him to give Purdue a bump there because the punting game, Ansell was just inconsistent. He had some really nice boots. He had some shanks. Purdue needs more consistency. Purdue needs more length on punts. I mean, length isn't the only thing that matters, but Purdue's got to be better in that part of the game as well. Special teams, critical area. You can't take steps backwards there. That would be a real problem. One thing that's hard to quantify in fall camp, but I think we'll start getting an idea. How much deeper and better is this season's roster than last year's? That's kind of the ultimate question about this team, I think, because Purdue seems very happy with what it did in the transfer portal. Purdue seems to like what it did, like its additions. It likes its true freshman class. How could you not? But how much has it changed? How much better are you? Because this is a more difficult schedule. You have to be better if you want to improve on that 4-8 record. And you can't just be better marginally. You have to be significantly better, I think. Purdue's done the right things in terms of going out and getting guys at key positions of need. But as we get into fall camp and as things start progressing, I'm very curious to see where Purdue really feels that it's significantly better than it was last season. And then finally, to wrap out my last question, can Purdue avoid a critical fall camp injury, a season-ending type injury in fall camp? 2 years ago, it was DeMar-J Lewis. It was Garrett Miller. Those guys both went down in 2022 fall camp, and that That might have been the first week of practice. Those guys went down really early. Last year, Jamal Adrine goes down in fall camp. Was going to be one of Purdue's top options at wide receiver. He goes down. So how much healthier can Purdue stay this year? Because while I think the roster is deeper, while I think the roster is better, Purdue doesn't need any of its ones to go down in fall camp. That would be a real bummer for Purdue, and it would get the season started on the wrong foot. Wanted to transfer in here, got some good questions from you guys. As always, we're entering the time of year where questions get more and more exciting. We've got actual ball to talk about. You can always send in Purdue questions, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com for those who want to email in, or you can tweet them to me at BoilersBeyond, or send me a DM there as well, at BoilersBeyond on Twitter. Love the questions, love the interaction from you guys. With CJ Smith, Nyland Green, Kendrick Breedlove, and more transfers coming in, how quickly can Purdue's staff develop these players to fit into Purdue's scheme? We kind of talked about this earlier. I think this is critical. And this is something that I'll be curious to see, as the transfer portal becomes such a big part of roster building. How feasible is it to have something very complex? And I'm not saying Purdue's is that, but just in general, is it feasible to have a very complex system if you're going to rely on transfers where you don't have a ton of time to onboard them before you need them? Because best case scenario, you get your 15 practices in the spring and then 15 practices in the fall before games start. I don't know how reasonable that is. So that's going to be interesting to see what schools do to accommodate the transfers. But yeah, Purdue needs these guys to come in and start and be some of your better players. CJ Smith is in line to be one of Purdue's better wide receivers. I think Nyland Green and Kendrick Breedlove are set to be starters at the corner spots. I think Breedlove will play that inside corner that Cam Allen played last year. Nyland Green will be an outside guy. But, Purdue needs these guys to all be really good, especially those corners, because Purdue doesn't have a ton of depth there that's not freshmen. You've got Derek Rogers, you got Markevius Brown. I'm probably forgetting someone else, but for the most part, it's young. Purdue needs those guys to come in and be instant impact right away. Brian asked me, what would you consider the position group that is the biggest concern going into fall camp? I'm going to go the defensive line here. I'll factor in the entire defensive line with the rush ends, with the nose tackle, the guys, playing across from the guards and tackles. The defensive front is going to be interesting to me, though, because Isaiah Nichols and Malik Langham ended up playing bigger roles last year than I expected. Those guys were really good for Purdue. Those guys were home runs out of the portal for what Purdue needed. Just guys who could play. This year, you've got names that you're familiar with. You have Cole Brevard, you have Moa Monade, Jeffrey Mbot, Chops Harkless. You have Joe Anderson. You have Jamarius Dinkins. You have Joe Strickland. You have a lot of names, but who are the guys who are really ready to play at a high level? It's going to be a group where you rotate a ton, but that means you need 6-7 guys who are capable of going out there and playing. And at the rush end spot, look, I get Kydron Jenkins moving to middle linebacker. That certainly helps him best for his pro career. But that leaves a pretty big gap at the rush end spot. I'm high on Will Helt. I think he's set to have a good career at Purdue. But asking him to replace Scorton or Jenkins' production of 10 or 7.5 sacks, that's a pretty big ask. That's a lot. I don't know that Helt can do that on his own. So you have C.J. Madden. You have Sheeta Saleh. You have the guy from Franklin College, Ojada. You have the transfer from Illinois, whose name I can't think of right now. But who in that group is a real difference maker? They're going to get one-on-one opportunities, but they've got to convert. And if the defensive line isn't stout, that puts Purdue's defense into a tizzy because you have to stop the run well for that defense to be effective, to get after the quarterback and to let those corners go at it one-on-one along with Dylan Thieneman back there. Going to be interesting to see there because I do. The defensive line is the position group I have the most questions about going into camp. A good question here, what would you identify as specific measurable signs or indicators of improvement for this year's team in relation to Walter's first-year team? He says he's curious because I'm not sure it's going to be able to be measured through the win-loss column due to strength of schedule. Yeah. Number one, if you can get improvement based on win-loss record, that's the ideal goal. And that should be the goal going into the season. You should hope that you can improve on a 4-8 season. But yeah, the schedule's brutal. Vegas doesn't think you're going to improve on it. Not that that means everything, but it certainly means something. This is tough because this is not a specific measurable sign or an indicator, but just the eye test. What does it look like? If Purdue, say Purdue goes 4-8 again, how do those 8 losses happen? I look back at last season, and Purdue was non-competitive in a number of its losses. In Fresno State kind of controlled that game. Purdue had a big play touchdown from Deion Burks that went 87 yards. Purdue had a kick return touchdown. You take those 2 away, Purdue only scored 21 points or something like that. I think it was 38-35, right? Sounds right. I just remember Fresno State feeling like they dominated time of possession. And that's not a good sign against a group of 5 team. Syracuse got out of hand in the second half. And that's a Syracuse team that fired its coach after last season. Wisconsin had an underwhelming year in year one under Luke Fickell. But that game was over as soon as it started. And while I know Purdue made a little push in the second half of that game, that there was never a chance that Purdue was going to win that. It wasn't going to happen. Nebraska was a really disappointing performance. Purdue coming off a bye is down 24-0 in that game. That wasn't a Nebraska team that was good. Now, Ohio State and Michigan weren't expected to be competitive games, but, they weren't. Does Purdue look and feel like a significantly improved team? Against some of those tougher opponents, is Purdue hanging in there? Are you going into the third and fourth quarter saying, well, it's not impossible? Or are you going in there saying, okay, this is over. It's 28-3. This is over. Purdue needs to be a little more competitive in some of those games. And in its coin flip games, your Michigan States, your Northwesterns, your Indianas, Illinois, Nebraska, Oregon State, if you're not winning those games, they need to be close. You can't be getting blown out by those teams or just feeling non-competitive in those games. But I will try to come up with some specific measurables. I guess, too, it's all a little bit relative because strength of schedule and who you play impacts some of this. But where is Purdue lining up statistically in the Big Ten? Is Purdue last in pass defense allowed again this year? That wouldn't be great. Is Purdue, where's Purdue at running the ball, throwing the ball, total offense, points per game allowed? Some of that stuff. If you're the bottom of the Big Ten and all of that, then that's a pretty good measurable indicator that the improvement wasn't there. Where are we at with the improvement of the kicking game this season? Also, which home game between Notre Dame, Oregon, or Penn State is more likely to have a chance at the upset? On the first one, we'll talk here in a couple weeks on our defense and special teams preview episode about the kicking game in more detail. But Spencer Porath, true freshman from Brownsburg, he's going to be your guy. He's going to be the starting kicker. It's aggressive to roll with a true freshman. I get it. You never really know until those lights come on. How is he going to perform? As I said earlier, Purdue was abysmal in the kicking game last season. Ben Freehill does return. He missed part of last year with a blood clot. Julio Macias departed. He's really struggled in Freehill's absence. Freehill's still there, so maybe he helps out with kickoffs, but I expect it to be Porath in the place kicking game, and we'll see where it goes. But yeah, Purdue's got to be better there. And on the upset front, Notre Dame, Oregon, or Penn State, which is more likely? I guess I'll go with Penn State. It's a November game, and you don't know where teams are going to be at that deep into the season with injuries and such. Now, double-edged sword, of course. You could be banged up, but we'll have more data on teams at that point. I don't love Drew Allar. I don't love Penn State's offense. I know statistically it's better than the eye test tells you. I still don't love it. Penn State's pretty good at not losing to teams it shouldn't lose to, though. Under James Franklin, Penn State's been very good at beating everyone besides Ohio State and Michigan. Is that going to continue? I don't know, but I don't love any of these. I think Notre Dame is a really physical program, and I don't know that Purdue is super well equipped, especially defensively, to handle a ton of physicality. With Oregon, Oregon's got a really good offensive line, as always. That's Mario Cristobal left them loaded there, and Dan Lanning hasn't stopped. And then elite athletes all over the field. Super veteran quarterback in Dylan Gabriel. I don't know that Purdue can stack up there. I just don't think athletically, from a talent perspective, and from a physicality perspective, I think all of that would be a real struggle for Purdue. So I guess we'll go with Penn State. I wanted to close with a quick thought. One of the big pieces of news from last week, scholarship limit changes across college athletics. Not going to go through all the sports here, but 105 for football, up from 85, 15 for men's basketball, up from 13, and we don't talk about college baseball on the show, really. I do follow it an okay amount. Baseball going from 11.7 to 34 is wild. That is rather brutal for northern schools. That's a tough one. Great deal for the players, but rough deal for northern schools. For football, though, this is where I think it's most interesting, because with basketball, it's hard to have 13 scholarship players. I don't know how you even dream of having 15, but we'll see what happens there. We'll see how often it's actually 15 real scholarship players. Same with football. 105 is a lot. You make 85 work because so many freshmen redshirt as a true freshman. But with 105, you're getting into a pretty high limit. I get why all of this is happening. It's all revenue sharing stuff so that the playing field is level, that you're not basing walk-ons and things on how you're going to distribute revenue. Every team's going to have 105 scholarships that you can split revenue among, is how I understand this. But it reverses the scholarship restrictions that were put in place when I think it was, 120 before it went to 85, that was designed to limit the roster sizes of the powerhouse programs, of what Tom Osborne was doing at Nebraska, of what Bear Bryant was doing at Alabama, where they would just stockpile talent so other schools couldn't have any. I'm curious to see what this really does. I think, more than anything, it's going to result in more players in the transfer portal, because you're just going to have more and more guys who are on a scholarship somewhere, don't end up playing, unhappy, hop in the portal. But it's going to be interesting to monitor that. That's all I've got for today. Thank you for spending your time with me. We'll be back next week to talk about Purdue's schedule as the countdown to kickoff rolls on. We'll be spending a few minutes on each of Purdue's 12 opponents, talk about what matters most with them. We'll go big picture thoughts and analysis on the schedule. Start sending in questions you have about the schedule and Purdue's opponents to me, either on Twitter @BoilersBeyond or via email boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Until next week, guys, take care. Enjoy those first few practice reports. We're almost there. Take care, everybody.